A man loses everything and starts from scratch, until one day he receives an unexpected visit. What happens next changes his life forever. After losing everything he had built throughout his life, John Henderson finds himself trapped in a spiral of loneliness and despair. But then, something from an old friend reappears, bringing with it a secret that could change everything. Driven by memories and a nearly forgotten hope, John embarks on a quest that will lead him to confront his past and question what the future still holds. What will be revealed, and how might it turn his life upside down? John Henderson was a 42-year-old man with a face marked by worry lines and fatigue. The owner of a small import and export business in Chicago, he had dedicated more than 3 decades of his life to his work, building his company brick by brick. His success came at the cost of personal sacrifices, especially the time he could have spent with his wife Laura, who had passed away a few years earlier. However, the last few years had been relentless. An unexpected financial crisis hit his company, and despite all his efforts, John was unable to save it. What was once a thriving enterprise was now nothing more than an empty space, with closed shutters and a for rent sign on the door. John watched helplessly as his savings, accumulated over a lifetime of hard work, drained away in an attempt to keep the business afloat. When the last client said goodbye and the lights went out for the final time, he felt as if a significant part of himself had been torn away. The impact of this loss was devastating. Without the company, John soon found himself in financial difficulties. He had no choice but to sell his house, a home full of memories where he and Laura had built a life together. Selling the house was a painful blow, as it represented everything they had accomplished. Laura always said that this was the house where they would grow old together, and leaving it behind was like losing Laura all over again, reliving the pain of her absence in an even more intense way. Now, John lived in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, a place that bore no resemblance to the comfort and familiarity of his old home. The space was cramped and cold, reflecting the loneliness he felt inside. He no longer had close friends. Many had drifted away over time, too busy with their own lives to notice how much he was sinking. John's days dragged on in a monotonous and purposeless sequence. He woke up every morning without a clear reason to get out of bed, his routine limited to automatic and meaningless actions. He spent long hours walking the streets of Chicago, a city that once inspired him but now seemed dark and oppressive. The streets he knew so well felt distant and strange, as if he no longer belonged there. John spent most of his time at home, isolated from the world. The apartment was always shrouded in silence, broken only by the distant sound of sirens and passing cars outside. At night, he lay in his cold, empty bed, surrounded by the oppressive silence of his new home. He tried to distract himself with television, but every program seemed to mock his situation. Movies and series that once brought him comfort were now bitter reminders of what he had lost. The question, "How did everything go so wrong?" echoed incessantly in his mind, tormenting him with regret and guilt. The grief for his past life, his company, his home, his wife, seemed to envelop everything. The loss of Laura was an open wound that time had not healed. He felt her absence in every corner of the apartment, every decision he had to make alone, every meal he ate without her company. The pain of loneliness was deep, and he felt abandoned even by his own willpower, which had always been his guide. What made everything even worse was the feeling of failure. John had always been a man who believed in hard work, discipline, and perseverance. He believed that with enough effort, any obstacle could be overcome. But now, looking at what was left of his life, he wondered if any of it really mattered. The failure of his company seemed to invalidate all the effort he had put in over the years. He repeatedly questioned whether he had made the right decisions, whether he could have done something different to avoid that tragic outcome. Despite all the suffering, there was a small flame inside John that refused to be extinguished. In the depths of his despair, he knew he couldn't go on living like this, just watching the days pass by aimlessly. Something inside him whispered that there was still a chance to start over, to find a new purpose. But how could someone who had lost everything find the strength to begin again? Then, on a particularly cold and gray morning, as he watched the raindrops run down the window, John made a decision. He couldn't simply accept his fate. He needed to find a way to pick himself up, to rebuild his life from scratch. Doubt still consumed him, but the idea of surrendering to hopelessness was unbearable. With this decision, a small spark of determination ignited in his heart. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but he was determined to find a way to regain control of his life. Even without a clear plan, John knew he couldn't give up. That cold and gray morning, which seemed so desolate, became the turning point he so desperately needed. From that moment on, John began to search for ways to climb out of the hole he had fallen into. He knew it wouldn't be easy and that he would need more than just willpower. He needed to rediscover who he was beyond the failed businessman, and that meant confronting the darkest parts of himself, the ones he had avoided facing since Laura's departure. Perhaps there was something within him that could still be salvaged, a passion, a forgotten dream, or even a new path he had never considered. As the days turned into weeks, John continued to fight his own demons. He began walking with more purpose, looking for small signs of change around him. He knew it would take a long time to rebuild himself, but each small victory, each step towards something different, helped to fuel the flame that was beginning to grow inside him. After making the decision to start over, John felt a new energy, albeit fragile, take over his days. He knew he needed to find a way to pick himself up, but the big question was, how? He had dedicated most of his life to the business world, and the idea of starting in a new line of work seemed daunting. The market was saturated, and he no longer had the same drive and vigor as before. Moreover, the fear of failing again was a constant shadow, hovering over any idea that came to his mind. Sleepless nights became a routine. John spent hours trying to think of creative solutions, but with each new idea, new doubts arose. Did he have what it took to face the business world again? Was it worth risking everything again? Amidst these uncertainties, a memory surfaced in his mind, bringing with it a possible answer. John remembered the conversations he used to have with his old clients and colleagues. He had always been a good storyteller, and he was often invited to speak about his business journey at conferences and local events. Perhaps, he thought, writing a book about his experiences could be a path forward. Not only would it be a way to process everything he had gone through, but it could also generate some income, something he desperately needed. The idea of writing a book began to gain traction. John had always had a dormant passion for writing, but he never found the time to explore it. Now, with his life in pieces, this passion seemed to be the only thing that could give him a new purpose. He imagined that putting his memories and lessons into words could be a form of healing, a way to make sense of everything that had happened. The next morning, determined, John sat down at his computer. The keyboard, worn from years of intense use, still worked. The screen flickered with a faint light as it turned on, reflecting John's state of mind. He took a deep breath and began to type. The first words came with difficulty, as if each letter were a weight he had to lift. He started by describing his childhood, life in a small town in rural Illinois, the challenges he faced in starting his business, and the years of dedication that followed. As he wrote, the memories flowed, some bringing a nostalgic smile to his lips, others making his eyes water with the pain of the memories. Writing about the loss of his wife Laura, for example, was one of the most challenging things he faced. The pain was still deep, but putting those feelings into words seemed to ease the burden he carried a little. As the text unfolded, John began to feel something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of purpose. Writing became his daily routine, and he found himself immersed in his own words, revisiting the past with a new perspective. Each chapter was a new discovery, a new layer of himself that he uncovered. During this process, something curious happened. While searching for old documents to use as references for the book, John found a forgotten box of papers at the back of a closet. It was a box he hadn't seen in years, covered in dust and marked by time. With his heart racing, he opened the lid, revealing a collection of old documents, yellowed photos, and letters from people who were no longer part of his life. Among the mess of memories, one letter in particular caught his attention. The envelope was sealed, with his name written by hand in cursive letters. The sender? Michael Thompson, a friend he hadn't seen in over 40 years. John felt a shiver run down his spine. Why had that letter never been opened? And what did it contain? With trembling hands, he picked up the letter and looked at it for a long moment before deciding to open the envelope. The curiosity mixed with nostalgia was too strong to ignore. As he opened the letter, John had no idea that he was about to embark on a new journey, one that would change his life in ways he never imagined. John held Michael's letter with trembling hands, feeling the weight of history between his fingers. It was strange to think that he had completely forgotten about that friendship, from a time that seemed to belong to another life. Michael and John had been inseparable during their childhood, but life had taken them in different directions. While Michael sought new adventures, John settled down with his business, building a seemingly secure and stable life. Now, this forgotten letter promised to bring back a lost piece of the past. With a deep sigh, he broke the seal on the envelope. The handwritten words appeared, shaky and slightly faded by time. John began to read, his heart beating faster with each line. Dear John, if you're reading this letter, it means something went right, or at least I hope so. It's been a long time since we last spoke, and even now, as I write, I feel a tightness in my chest remembering the things we left behind. Friendships, places, moments. It all went by so fast, didn't it? I'm writing to tell you something important, something I should have said in person, but life, as always, had other plans. When I left Chicago, it was to try for a new beginning. The world seemed full of possibilities, but also uncertainties. And in the midst of those uncertainties, I decided to leave something behind, something that might be useful one day if things didn't go well. I always knew you were one of the few people I could trust, so I chose you to keep this secret. I don't know if we're still in touch or if you even remember me, but in any case, I wanted you to know that I left something hidden for you, something that might change your life, or at least I hope it does. If you're still in Chicago, go to the old warehouse where we used to spend our summers, the old place on Aberdeen Street. Inside a false wall, I hid something that I believe might be valuable. I don't know how things are for you now, but I hope this gift from the past can help you in some way. With fondness and longing, Michael Thompson. John finished reading the letter and sat in silence for a long time. This was a piece of his past that he had never imagined re-encountering. The idea that Michael had hidden something for him, something that could be valuable, seemed surreal. The warehouse on Aberdeen Street, which they used as a base for their childhood games, was a place he hadn't visited in decades. Now, it seemed that fate was calling him back. John's mind buzzed with possibilities. What could Michael have hidden? And why had he never mentioned this before he left? The questions piled up, and for a moment, John felt like a boy again, full of curiosity and anticipation. However, he also felt a twinge of skepticism. So many years had passed and the world had changed. Could it be possible that something was still there, waiting for him? John knew that the only way to find out was to go to the location and search. He tried to remember exactly where the warehouse was. Although it had aged and been forgotten, the memory of that place slowly resurfaced, bringing back flashes of a simpler time. The next day, John decided he couldn't wait any longer. Armed with the letter and a bit of hope, he drove to the neighborhood where he grew up. The streets had changed, the old shops and houses replaced by new developments, but he recognized the way. The warehouse was there, half hidden between new buildings, almost as if it were waiting for him. With his heart racing, John entered the abandoned warehouse, smelling the dust and aged wood. The place was dark, but he knew exactly where to look. After a few minutes of exploration, he found the wall Michael had mentioned in the letter. With some effort, he managed to remove a loose board and, to his surprise, there was a small metal box, rusted by time. John took out the box and held it for a moment, feeling the weight of history in his hands. This moment, this reunion with the past, was something he had never expected. Without further hesitation, he opened the box, eager to discover what his old friend had left for him. Inside the box, wrapped in an old, yellowed cloth, were some objects that immediately caught his attention. There was a collection of old coins, all carefully packed, and an envelope that looked as old as the box itself. The coins were unlike anything John had ever seen. They had strange inscriptions and symbols he didn't recognize, but he could feel they were important. It was obvious that Michael had kept these coins with great care, which suggested they had some value. But what really intrigued John was the envelope, which was clearly addressed to him. He picked up the envelope with trembling fingers and opened it. Inside was a second letter, shorter than the first but still full of meaning. John began to read carefully, aware that Michael's words might contain the answers he was so desperately seeking. With the metal box in his hands, John felt a mix of anxiety and curiosity. It was hard to believe that something hidden for so long could have any value or relevance today. But at the same time, he felt that this discovery was not just a coincidence. It was as if, after years of darkness and uncertainty, a light was finally beginning to shine in his life. John found a small wooden table in the corner of the warehouse, where he could sit and open the box calmly. He took a deep breath and carefully opened the rusted lid. Inside, wrapped in an old, yellowed cloth, were some objects that immediately caught his attention. There was a collection of old coins, all carefully packed, and an envelope that looked as old as the box itself. The coins were unlike anything John had ever seen. They had strange inscriptions and symbols he didn't recognize, but he could feel they were important. It was obvious that Michael had kept these coins with great care, which suggested they had some value. But what really intrigued John was the envelope, which was clearly addressed to him. He picked up the envelope with trembling fingers and opened it. Inside was a second letter, shorter than the first but still full of meaning. John began to read carefully, aware that Michael's words might contain the answers he was so desperately seeking. "John, if you found this box, then my mission is complete. These coins are more valuable than they appear. They belong to a rare collection that has been in my family for generations. I never knew what to do with them, but I always knew they might be useful one day. Besides, there is one more secret I need to share with you. Before I left, I registered a property in your name. Everything is in the documents inside this box. This property is special, something you need to see for yourself. Could be a new beginning, something I believe you need right now. The property is located in a small town north of Illinois called Galena. It's a beautiful place, and I always thought you would appreciate it. You'll find the legal documents here, and once you resolve everything, I hope this place brings you the peace and fresh start you so deserve. I wish I could have told you this in person, but time was ruthless with us. However, know that wherever I am, I'm rooting for you, my old friend. With friendship and gratitude, Michael." John felt a wave of emotion wash over his chest. He could never have imagined that Michael, even after so many years of silence, would have left something so significant for him. The idea of owning a property, something he had recently lost, was almost surreal. But beyond the material value, there was something even deeper in this discovery. The sense of connection, the feeling that someone had thought of him even after all this time. He looked at the documents in the box and confirmed what the letter said. The papers were in his name, and the property in Galena was indeed real. It wasn't just any house, but a piece of land with a small rustic cabin, located in an area surrounded by nature. John felt a mixture of gratitude and determination. Perhaps this was the opportunity he so desperately needed, the push that destiny was giving him to climb out of the depths. He knew he couldn't let this chance slip away and decided he would go to Galena as soon as possible to see what Michael had left for him. In the following days, John prepared everything for the trip. He reviewed the documents, made sure everything was in order, and packed his bags. There was a new enthusiasm in his heart, something he hadn't felt in a long time. As he drove along the roads that would take him to Galena, he reflected on the strange twist his life had taken. Arriving in the town, John was surprised by its beauty. Galena was a charming little town, with cobblestone streets and historic houses. He followed the instructions in the letter, and after a short drive, he finally found the property. It was exactly as Michael had described, a peaceful piece of land with a simple but cozy cabin. John parked the car and got out, feeling the fresh air on his face. He knew this was a new phase of his life. Michael had given him more than just a property and some old coins. He had given him the chance to start over, to build something new from the ashes of his past. Inside the cabin, he found one more surprise. In one of the rooms, there was a small bookshelf full of books, and among them, a journal. Michael's journal, where he recorded his thoughts and plans for the future. The cabin in Galena had a comforting simplicity. With rustic wooden walls and an old fireplace in the corner of the room, the place exuded a sense of peace that John hadn't felt in a long time. He spent the first few hours exploring the interior, observing every detail as if rediscovering the world. There was something almost magical about that space, as if Michael had prepared everything especially for him. After settling in, John turned his attention to the journal he found on the shelf. With a mix of anticipation and caution, he sat in the armchair by the fireplace, opened the journal, and began to read the first pages. Michael's words revealed a complex man, full of dreams and regrets, but also someone who had always had a deep connection with John, even after so many years of separation. In the first pages, Michael talked about his decision to leave Chicago and try his luck abroad. He described the difficulty of leaving everything he knew, especially the friendships he had cultivated during his childhood. John discovered that Michael had always wanted to share what he had left behind, but circumstances had prevented him from returning or even communicating. As John progressed through the reading, a specific passage caught his attention. Michael mentioned a series of coins he had inherited from a distant relative, a collector who had spent years traveling the world. The coins were not only rare but also incredibly valuable, with a historical significance that went beyond any monetary value. Michael wrote about the dilemma of what to do with the coins. He considered selling them to finance his travels, but deep down, he felt they should be preserved and handed over to someone he trusted. That was why he had chosen John, not only as a guardian of these relics, but as the recipient of something much larger. At the end of the journal, Michael revealed the location of a trusted lawyer in Chicago who could help John authenticate the coins and assess their real value. More than that, he mentioned a hidden treasure, legal documents proving ownership of a vast tract of land, an inheritance that Michael had not claimed in life, but which he was now passing on to John. John was in shock as he read these revelations. He had always known that Michael was an adventurer, someone who sought experiences and opportunities, but he had never imagined that his old friend carried such a big secret. The idea of owning land, in addition to the cabin in Galena, was something he could never have anticipated. But there was more. Michael had also left instructions for John to use the money from the sale of the coins and the income from the property for something he believed was important: helping small business owners who, like John, were facing financial difficulties. Michael, who had always admired John's courage in entrepreneurship, knew that his friend would understand the value of such an initiative. With his heart full of emotion, John knew he had a decision to make. He could simply sell the coins, solve his own financial situation, and move on, or he could honor Michael's memory and use this gift to help others who were in the same situation he had been in. John decided that he would do exactly what Michael expected of him. The next morning, he hit the road back to Chicago, with Michael's journal by his side and the certainty that his life had changed forever. Upon arriving in the city, John's first stop was the lawyer's office mentioned in the journal. After a long conversation and showing the documents he had found, the lawyer confirmed the authenticity of the coins and the existence of the land in question. The coins, according to him, were worth a small fortune, enough to get John out of any financial trouble and still provide him with a comfortable life. But the land was the real treasure. Located in a valuable area, it had immense potential for development, something John would never have imagined. Upon hearing these words, John felt a mixture of relief and responsibility. He knew he now had the means to not only rebuild his life but also make a difference in the lives of others. John spent the following weeks resolving all the legal procedures with the help of the lawyer. He managed to sell the coins for a significant amount, and soon after began the process of selling the land, with the condition that part of the profit be allocated to a support fund for small business owners. The lawyer was impressed by John's generosity and promised to help him create the fund so that Michael's legacy would be preserved. Gradually, John's life began to transform. He still continued working on the book, but now with a new perspective. His experiences were not just about loss and failure, but also about redemption and new beginnings. He knew his story could inspire others, and that motivated him to keep writing. Throughout the process, John felt Michael's presence by his side, as if his friend were guiding every step. He knew that Michael had planned everything carefully, leaving him the necessary tools not only to survive but to thrive. With the sale of the land and the creation of the support fund for small business owners, John felt as if he had finally found a new purpose in his life. The fund, created in honor of Michael, soon began to make a difference, providing financial support and guidance to those who, like him, had faced difficulties. John personally dedicated himself to the project, ensuring that every person who received help was treated with dignity and respect. He understood what it was like to be at rock bottom, feeling powerless in the face of adversity. This knowledge gave him the ability to connect with the fund's beneficiaries in a unique way, offering not only resources but also hope. John realized that by helping other business owners, he was helping himself heal his own wounds. Moreover, the completion of John's book brought a new chapter to his life. Titled Beginnings: Lessons from a Rebuilt Life, the book became an almost immediate success. People were touched by John's sincerity in sharing his journey of loss, discovery, and renewal. The story of Michael's hidden treasure and how it transformed John's life was especially inspiring to readers. John realized that his story was not just his. It was a universal message of resilience, hope, and the importance of allowing oneself to start over. With the book's release, John was invited to participate in several interviews and literary events. He found himself telling his story to audiences across the country, and every time he shared his experience, he felt more connected to the people who listened. Many of them approached him after the events, thanking him for finding comfort and inspiration in his words. He saw in the eyes of these people the reflection of his own journey, and that motivated him to continue. John realized that his book was not just a personal account but a message of resilience and hope. He found meaning in his pain and in the journey of rebuilding, and this meaning was reflected in how he now helped others rise. Michael's words echoed in his mind, constantly reminding him of the power of true friendship and how a simple gesture can change lives. As his book gained popularity, the support fund continued to grow. Businesses that John had helped save began to prosper, and many of the assisted business owners started contributing to the fund, maintaining the cycle of support and growth. The positive impact spread, creating a network of solidarity that went far beyond what John could have ever imagined. On one of his visits to Galena, while walking around the cabin, John was overcome by a deep reflection. He realized how completely his life had transformed. The man who was once on the brink of despair now saw himself as a mentor, a guide for others facing their own battles. He knew that this transformation would not have been possible without the silent support of Michael, whose actions, even in absence, had ignited a flame that John thought had gone out forever. Besides his dedication to the fund and the book, John began to actively engage in the Galena community. He participated in local events, offered free lectures on resilience and entrepreneurship, and even helped organize fairs promoting small businesses in the region. The cabin, which had once been just a refuge, was now becoming a meeting point for ideas and innovations, a place where dreams were renewed and plans were drawn. John's connection to the cabin and Michael's legacy deepened with each visit. He came to see that piece of land as a symbol of rebirth, not just for himself but for everyone who found a new chance there. He also started writing a second book, this time focused on the stories of the people he helped, showing how hope and resilience could transform lives. The new project brought him a renewed sense of purpose, and John knew that this time he was not just rebuilding his life, but also leaving a legacy that would echo for a long time. Time passed, and John found himself aging with serenity, something he never thought possible during his darkest years. He felt at peace with the world and with himself, grateful for every little twist that had brought him to this point. On a sunny afternoon, as he sat on the porch of the cabin, John reflected on everything that had happened. The unexpected visit to the past, Michael's letter, the coins, the land, and finally, the rebirth of his own life. All of it had led him to a place he never imagined he would be. John knew that Michael had left him more than just a material gift. He had left a legacy of friendship, trust, and hope. And now that legacy was multiplying, reaching people that John might never meet, but who would be impacted by his story. With a serene smile, John closed his eyes and took a deep breath, absorbing the tranquility around him. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. He was ready to face whatever came. And deep down, he knew that no matter what happened, he would always have Michael's memory and everything he had learned from this journey to guide him.